The reason that I wrote the book is because I really wanted to help people. I am well aware of the fact that in our society, it is still extremely taboo to talk about things like child sexual abuse and even mental illness. And so I made a decision that because I was strong enough to do it, that I was going to write a book that told the truth. Because what I saw was that a lot of people have misunderstandings about different types of trauma and child abuse. And I really wanted people to understand what abuse does to victims so that they can understand all the sort of strange symptoms sometimes that evolve out of that. It's a way for me to help survivors to understand themselves as well as other people to understand survivors. So that's why I chose to write the book. What's really unique about Scared Selfless is that as a psychologist, I'm able to not only tell my story of abuse and mental illness and eventual healing, I'm also able to provide context all along the way to explain things. So I don't just talk about child sexual abuse, I explain why pedophiles do what they do. I explain how they choose their victims. I say what it does to victims, how it affects them. And I'm able to talk about how to find good therapy, what makes good therapy so that you can eventually heal. So what's really unique about Scared Selfless from any book that's ever been written is the fact that I am able to explain child sexual abuse and trauma from both the inside out and the outside in. And in this way, the reader is able to get both a visceral experience of abuse and trauma and healing, as well as an intellectual understanding. And that's what really makes it unique. One of my most important goals in writing the book was to talk about the effects of child abuse, because I really am not sure that people understand how damaging child abuse, child sexual abuse, abandonment, neglect, having an alcoholic parent, having domestic abuse in the home. People don't understand how damaging that is to children. And it doesn't just damage them in the short term. It damages them often for the rest of their lives. The research shows that if a child is abused in any way, that by the time they turn 21, they have an 80% chance of having at least one psychiatric condition. So there is a very, very direct link between any kind of child abuse and mental illness later on. And I don't think people are always aware of that. We act as if mental illness is its own thing without understanding the root cause. Child abuse later in life often leads to adults with depression, with anxiety, with eating disorders, with criminal activity. It's been linked to violence, particularly with men. It's been linked to promiscuity and different sorts of sexual problems, to relationship issues, to borderline personality disorder, to dissociative disorders. The list goes on and on. And that is one of the things that I really wanted people to understand, so that when you meet someone with one of these disorders, you start to understand the link to the past that may be there. And also so that when we are dealing with children who have been abused, we are looking for these things so that we can try to treat them more quickly. One of the things I spend a lot of time on in the book is talking about therapy. I talk about my own journey of trying to find help. From a very early age, I was aware of the fact that I had a lot of problems. I knew I had mental illness and I was in a lot of pain, but I made the decision that I was going to find the help I needed to try to get better. Unfortunately, just making that decision wasn't enough. I talk about this in the book. I went from therapist to therapist to therapist trying to find the right one. And I talk a lot in the book about why the different therapies that I tried weren't necessarily helpful. Sometimes it was my fault, I wasn't ready, but sometimes it was the therapist's fault. And I talk about that in the book, not because I'm trying to pick on my own profession, but because I want people who are looking for help to sort of understand what to look for. What I tend to see is people will say to me, "Oh, I tried therapy. I went a few times and it didn't work. I didn't like the therapist, that it didn't work." But that is really sort of irrational. Finding a good therapist is like finding a mate. You have to kiss a lot of therapist frogs before you find the right therapist prince. And so that's sort of what I try to get to in the book. Eventually, I did find my perfect therapist, and she was incredibly helpful to me and inspiring and supportive, and she helped me to heal. And that is eventually why I decided to become a therapist, because I wanted to do for others what she had done for me. I think if there's one thing I want people to take away from the book, it's that no matter how bad things are, no matter how hard things are, how much pain you're in, how much disappointment you have in your life, how terrible you think people are, how much you think God hates you, or if you think there's no God at all, it's possible to heal. And I know that because I did it. I know that because I went on a very long, hard, painful journey. And if I knew then what I know now about how good life could be, I I think it would have been so helpful to me. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to share my story. Back when I was being abused, it was hell. And all I could dream of was escape. And then when I finally did escape, that was also hell. It was absolute hell because I started to have the feelings about all of the abuse. And trying to find help was so very difficult. And there was so often, so often when I lost faith. And I would actually pray to God just to give me faith that things would turn out okay. And I couldn't see it then. But I kept going, and I kept trying, and I kept trying new therapists, and I kept trying new things, and I kept reading more to learn about why I had mental illness and what child abuse had done to me. And little by little, over the years, I started to have all these wonderful things come into my life. I started to have people who loved me come into my life. And then eventually I had a therapist who was competent and wonderful and dedicated and passionate who came into my life. And everything started to turn around for me. But it wasn't quick. It was very, very hard, and it took a long time. And if I hadn't kept at it and really kept trying, I don't think I would have gotten where I am today. And it's just the most amazing thing now because my life is so good. And I would have never, ever conceived that it could be this good, that I could be married for 23 years, that I could have a child that I adore, that I could have friends that I adore, that I could have work that is so incredibly meaningful to me. So I think that that is really the message that I want to send to everyone. I want people, particularly people who are in pain right now, to challenge themselves to keep going and to challenge themselves to have faith even when it doesn't make any sense. Because at 20, I could not possibly conceive of how good my life would be now. And now looking back with hindsight, I'm actually grateful for all of the pain that I endured. Because had I not endured all of that pain and all of that strife, I wouldn't be where I am. And I wouldn't have the skills and the knowledge and the empathy to be able to help people. And that's really my joy now. My joy and my mission in life is to help other people to overcome their pain. And so I really hope that in reading my book and in learning more about my life, that people can be inspired to keep going and be inspired to heal and have faith that it does honestly get so much better over time.